confirmed that they have no hard evidence relating Osama bin Laden to the events of 9/11. Are you aware of that?
Well, Osama bin Laden himself claims that. I mean, they didn't manufacture those tapes.
This is the FBI, Ollie. This is the FBI that has affirmed in the last couple of weeks they have no hard evidence tying Osama bin Laden to 9/11.
And so all of these people that died on 9/11 were, as you're articulating, died as a consequence of what our government did.
We're trying to find out exactly what happened. Our government has a considerable reputation for telling things that are not true.
All right,
Ollie.
Professor, we thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thursday night, I was invited on to Hannity and Combs ostensibly to discuss the results of investigations conducted by Scholars for 9/11 Truth. When I got on the show, however, I discovered that instead of wanting to address the rather crucial results, such as we have been discussing here, including that we had established that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition, which I said, including that we had Norman Mineta's testimony that Dick Cheney had given a stand-down order not to shoot the plane approaching the Pentagon, which we had, including that the FBI in recent weeks had affirmed it has no hard evidence connecting Osama bin Laden to 9/11, which I said they were more interested in whether I had discussed any of these questions with my students than whether what I was telling them was true.
And the first time I saw Building 7 come down straight and fast, I realized this is very curious. I hadn't seen it until just about, it's been about a year and a half now ago. And as soon as I saw it, in a sense, I was hooked. I figured, as a scientist, I can't just ignore this data. I could see that building come straight down. I'd seen demolitions before, controlled demolitions. They look just like that. A kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed. Yeah. And pretty quick, I'm learning about molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet, and yet it comes down, and then it's got this molten metal underneath. And where'd that come from? I have a sample of this molten metal, previously molten metal here. Just a tiny sample. This is really all we need. I brought along with me at the last minute. I thought, well, I'll throw that in. And by analyzing this, we determined it is not molten aluminum from the plane. Okay. Indeed, it contains a great deal of iron, which is the product of the thermite reaction. Now, thermite can be purchased on eBay, and many people, I show it in my class, physics, and I'll be showing it this fall in my physical science class. It's commonly shown. It's a very brilliant reaction. You get this white flare, this white dust, which is aluminum oxide coming off, and then this yellow hot molten metal, just white yellow hot, flowing out of this reaction. Now this thermite is so hot, this molten iron, especially when you mix sulfur in, now it's called thermate, and it'll just cut through steel, through structural steel, for example, like a knife through butter. And we also see this molten, yellow hot molten metal with white wispy ash pouring out of the South Tower just minutes before its collapse. And I've shown this video, and it's just amazing. The photographs of that, it's in the NIST report, and the evidence is just piling up. This is, it has the characteristics not of molten aluminum and not of molten, it's not just structural steel that somehow melted. No, it's very little chromium. But it does have sulfur and manganese and some other elements that are characteristic, you see. It's like a fingerprint that the criminal left behind. This carries with it evidence. How was this done? What was used? This chain of events leads me to reluctantly conclude that indeed there does seem to be insider, in other words, not just the hijacked planes, but also others involved setting these thermite cutter charges in the World Trade Center to bring them down. This again leads to the conclusion that our Constitution, which is our heritage as Americans, I love my country, I love the Constitution and the people in America. I'm afraid that our Constitution is literally hanging by a thread at this stage.
Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. It is unprecedented that I would get email about a For the Record program before the program even aired. But that was the case in the 24 hours before we taped this show Friday afternoon, as I received several emails of both support and outrage from people who had simply heard Kevin Barrett was to be my guest. Such is the passion generated by Mr. Barrett's views on the events of September 11th, 2001. The most recent event of which I'm aware is the resolution signed by 61 state legislators calling for the UW to fire Mr. Barrett. Kevin Barrett is my guest this morning. Mr. Barrett, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, it's good to be with you, Neil.
My question is, shouldn't it be simple enough to provide the evidence that would support the claims of the government? I mean, there should be plenty of physical evidence, shouldn't there?
Well, it depends which claims you're talking about. Personally, I think that the real core of the whole 9/11 question is the issue of whether the 3 World Trade Center buildings were demolished with explosives or whether they fell down for some other reason, such as being damaged by plane crashes or fires. And I think that at this point, the evidence is in. Anybody who's kept up on, with the critique of the official story in this area knows that at this point, the evidence just, is very convincing that all 3 buildings were taken down with explosives and controlled demolitions. For the government to try to disprove that at this point or to try to support its case, I think would be very difficult because, they hid all the evidence. They prevented any kind of forensic investigation. All the steel was shipped off as fast as possible to China and melted down for scrap, so it was impossible to test the steel for signs of explosives. Fortunately, some remains, and Professor Stephen Jones has gotten his hands on multiple sources worth of steel, and he's run tests and he's found traces of thermate, an enhanced version of thermite, which is an explosive device that can take out steel, cut right through it like a knife through butter. I think that at this point, no rational person who looks at the evidence can argue against the proposition that the 3 World Trade Center buildings, the Twin Towers and WTC-7 especially, were taken down in controlled demolitions. That, I think, is by now proven beyond a reasonable doubt, as David Griffin has said, and as everybody who's looked into it, I think, from a fair-minded perspective, agrees.
Are you worried that you're shortchanging your own career, that that you will have difficulty pursuing your chosen field by virtue of the controversy?
I think what I'm doing is angling on the long term. In the short term, I may have some problems. It might be a little harder to get rehired next semester. Maybe not, though. I think a lot sooner than most people realize 9/11 is going to blow wide open. The official report doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It's very simple. Any trained academic, anybody with any critical thinking skills at all, can read the official report and read David Ray Griffin's refutation, and the report just falls to shreds. Now, anybody who's willing to live with that report as the official record of the most important event of our century has no business calling themselves an intellectual or a teacher or anything. I mean, it's that obvious.
Hello, I'm AJ Hammer, live in New York City.
And I'm Brooke Anderson, live in Hollywood. AJ, it's been incredible, pretty hard to believe, actually, the response we got today to the incredible story Showbiz Tonight broke last night. Actor Charlie Sheen's startling claims that the government may be covering up what really happened on September 11th.
So many emails coming in. We've been really overwhelmed today. Between the emails, the blogs, the websites, everybody is writing and talking about it. Charlie Sheen made the comments during a hard-to-believe interview on a radio show. And don't move, because in just a moment, the host of the radio show, the guy who actually spoke with Sheen, is going to join me live here on Showbiz Tonight. But first, let's get you up to speed on the latest developments.
The more you look at stuff, especially